cutie pies. I am Lanikia, and you are watching What Happened on the Soaps. This is Days of Our Lives edition. Today is Monday, January the 15th, 2024. Um, and let's go ahead and get into it. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was a solid 6. It was a solid 6. Let's go ahead and get into it. First off, we see Chanel, Paulina, and Abe. They're going around. They've passed out um, food and everything to the citizens because it's MLK Day, and so they're just showing their community fellowship and everything. And Johnny comes out and he's offering free coffee as the pub's part of it. And so, they all sit down, not sit down, but they all stand around and they talk. And Johnny and Chanel are lovey dovey. And so Chanel's going to stay at the pub with Johnny. And Paulina and Abe are leaving because she has to do her podcast. So when Chanel and Johnny leaves, they run into Nicole, Paulina, and Abe. And when they run into Nicole, they just tell her that they're praying for Holly. They're doing everything they can to get these drugs off the streets. And she understands that they are. And then she tells them about sending Holly, maybe sending Holly to Italy. She tells them that they helped EJ come back from the brink of death. So they're hoping that if Holly qualifies, she can do this as well. And yeah, they just talk to her about it, and she and they again tell her, they're very sorry about everything going on, and express, that they wish Holly the best, and then they move right along from that. So then we see Abe and Paulina at the office. She's in her office now, getting ready to do her podcast. And so she tells Abe, she's a little bit nervous about it, and he says you'll do fine. And then as they're getting the sound and everything checked, she says she hopes she doesn't cough. And Abe asks her about her test results, and she said she's supposed to get them tomorrow. And he's like, well, why didn't you tell me? She said, because I don't want you coming with me to get my results out of obligation. And he says it's not out of obligation because you didn't ask me. I volunteered. So because of that, I want to go with you. And so he does. He tells her that, and so then she starts the podcast, and she's doing a great job. But then she goes into a little. She doesn't cough like she did with Chad and them. She just has a little hiccup. Abe gets her through it, and that's it. And it turned out to be a good podcast that she got through. So then we see Jada, and again, I'm not gonna hold you long. Then we see Jada and Rafe, and she's upset because she's been profiled at the store, and the people asked to check her bag. And she said, I had lip gloss in there that I bought 2 days ago. I told them I was a cop, but because I didn't have my badge on me, they didn't believe me. And so she's upset about it. And she said, thank gosh, Rafe is like, thank gosh, the two men who, because it was the security guard and the owner of the shop that called the police on her. So when the police came, they were like, this is Jada. She's a police officer. So they straightened everything out, but she's shaken up about that, about being followed around. So they're at the pub, right? And so Chanel and Johnny are there because Chanel stayed, and Jada's like, she's had the morning from hell, because Johnny is just like, we got everything you need, and I'm here working since Tate can't be here, so we got everything you need. And she said, "You got something from for the money morning from hell?" And Chanel's like, "Oh, I have some donuts from Sweet Bits." So they sit down and they're talking to them, and Jada explains what's happened to her. And Chanel said, "Oh yes, I know all about being profiled." But anyways, Johnny and Chanel go to their table. Rafe and Jada are still sitting at their table, and Chanel and Jada begin to tell their experiences about being profiled, and Rafe also gives his experience. Um, you know what's so crazy about going in stores is that people will, look at, like, question you, especially if you go into like little boutiques. Because I remember one time I went into this store. I had just moved to the area and I went into the store with my sisters and everything. And this woman's just like, you could tell she was uncomfortable having us in there because I guess she thought, because I had Mila in her stroller and I had my baby bag and everything. And having been a shop owner, I get one part understands, um or you try to be understanding. Well, you have these bags and you probably think you're gonna drop something in it or whatever, but then you see other people in there with the same like strollers and everything, and they're not being watched or whatever. That's always been funny to me as you go throughout the stores and you see um them being more cautious towards you. And then you watch as the other person is actually stealing. You like, baby, I wasn't going to steal anything. And then you watch as the other people are actually stealing. Let's move on. So they talk about all this, and then Rafe explains the situation that happened with him. And Jada, then she talks about her hair. Rafe says about writing a check and having to put his phone number on there in two forms of ID and everything. Funny. And then Jada talks about her hair, and she and Chanel, because she calls Chanel over, and so they all sit down and they talk about how people just come up and they ask to touch your hair. And I think Chanel said, somebody didn't even ask, they just started, uh, or it might have been Jada, how they didn't even ask, they just started touching your hair. And I said, oh, I think we've all had that experience. Because at work, this man used to always come up and he would try to stick his hand in my hair, and I'd be like, sir, what is wrong with you? Because I worked in a call center one time. I was a supervisor, and even like my team members were just like, you just don't do that, like that's just rude. But people do that. I don't know what's that fascination about hair. It's like this is not magic, it grows out of the head. But anyways, y'all, they were just talking about that, and then they listened in on Paulina's podcast. And let's move on. So then we go over here to Leo and Sloan, and I and Leo is just like, mm, well, I'm living off this little bit of allowance that you gave me. That's not really taking care of the needs that I like, but I'm about to get this paycheck from being the lady whistleblower, so I'm gonna enjoy that. And so he tells her that he's about to start writing a column, and she says, "Are you writing a column?" He said, "It's gonna be fireworks. You're gonna enjoy it." She's like, "Is it about me?" And he was like, "No." And she said, "Leo, I'm trying to save money, and if you want to have any type of allowance from me, then you can't spend all the money up, or we're both gonna be hungry. We're both gonna be hungry." And he was like, "I understand." But he tells her the column isn't about her, but she needs to tread lightly. And she's like, "Leo, you promised me." And so at this point, Nicole comes up and she was like, "Promised you what?" And she was like, "Leo was a client of mine. Not that it's any of your business, but he was a client, and now he can't make his payments." And Nicole said, "Well, no, it's not my business." So then they start talking, and they get on the subject of Sloan having to go have dinner with Eric's parents because they're gonna come over. Well, John and Marlena, they're gonna come over, and Marlena's so perfect, and Nicole starts telling her, "Girl, Marlena is not that perfect. They talk about Sammy, and she said Sammy was in her teenage years, and Marlena had an affair with John, and Sammy was ticked and all that. So Nicole is just telling Sloan, relax, like don't be that way." And then she thanks Sloan for how generous she's been, and understanding she's been, that Eric's been spent so much time with Holly and Nicole. And she says, "Well, I haven't been that generous." She says, "What do you mean?" And so she tells her about, how she saw Eric and Nicole and Holly the next day, after Nicole had kidnapped, her baby. She saw them next day sitting down enjoying. I guess you remember that day they had their tea and all that kind of stuff, like a family. And she said, and that hurt. And N- Nicole just tells her, "Well, I'm sorry about that. I know that had to be painful because it would have been painful for me as well." And then she tells Nicole, Sloan tells Nicole, "Well, I know he's always gonna love Holly just the same way he's always gonna love you, and I just have to live with it." And then Nicole's feeling guilty, or whatever about that, because she was like, "I'm sorry, Sloan," and she tries to stop Sloan, and Sloan was like, "It is what it is," and Sloan starts walking away. I said, "Well, girl, getting involved with Eric means that he's always gonna have a thing for Nicole. I mean, that just is what it is. Let's move on." So then we go over here to Everett and Chad. So Everett and Chad are doing their community service commitment to this community service or service, and they're picking up trash with Thomas and Charlotte. And Everett is just talking, and he's like, Chad tossed Thomas a ball, and he was like, he's gonna be good, and with the bat and the swing, and all that. And he said lacrosse, and he was like, you must not be a sports guy. So while Chad is talking to Everett, you could clearly see something's wrong with him, and he says, well, what's the matter? And he said, I'm okay, I'm okay. He was like, what is it? He says, since the coma and everything, I've had dizzy spells. Now, did you hear Jada say that her husband just disappeared? Mm-hmm. Okay. Her husband just disappeared. I don't know if Bobby doesn't know, but he had I don't know, child. Let's move on. But so he says, Chad was like, "What can I get you some water?" He was like, "No, I just need a protein bar." So he was like, "Okay, we can leave." So they leave and go back to the paper to work, and Everett is feeling better. They said, "Okay, well then let's work on everything." And he tells him that he does have someone listening in to the podcast. I thought there was going to be like a bunch of reporters or something in the room, but it was just Abe and Pauline. I said, "You mean just actually listening?" Oh, and Chad says, "Well, let's be careful with that because we don't want to say that Paulina's sick or something, and that not be the case because it could just be a common cold." And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, of course." So then, Leo ends up coming in, and what is the rest of this thing? Anyways, when Leo ends up coming in, he um he tells Chad and Everett about his story that he's written, and they're just like, okay, let's look at it. So he sends it over to them, and they love it. It was about civil rights act, like a gay activist who wasn't able to really participate with civil rights because they wanted to keep it separate. Um, but he was really a gay civil rights activist and everything, and he pushed the boundaries. And they say, why was this story buried? And they was like, because a lot of them get buried because people don't want to speak on it. And so then Chad says this is a great story, and Everett says it is, and then they talk about, but Chad's thinking, well, maybe I can't publish this because I don't want to rock the boat with readers. And he was like, Everett, what do you think? And I said, Everett, you need to be asking Xander. That's your partner. And Everett was like, let's do it. Let's just do it. And so they're like, okay. And then they tell Leo they're going to actually put his name on it because it's not like a lady whistleblower piece. It's an actual article that he's written. And so he's like, okay, cool. And even Leo, when they were all talking and stuff, he said, Xander is never here. And Chad is saying, he's working from home. And he said, nah, he's with Sarah and the baby. That's just an excuse so that he didn't have to come in the office. That man is not working from home. But anyways, Leo ends up telling them that why did I do that? That he ends up telling them that now he feels good about himself, and he's gonna go out, and he wants the rest of the day off. And they said, Leo, you don't get, when you're a journalist, you don't get the days off. Like, a story could break at any moment. And he was like, oh. And they said, but Chad told him you could have the rest of the day off, go and do your community service. He was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I plan on doing. I like when Leo's like this because it's funny. But anyways, that's it, y'all. That's pretty much it for Days of Our Lives. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.